give a warm welcome to the hosts of the Bride of Alternate Ending.
Ghouls and goblins were ill the day the earth stood still, but they tuned in anyway. And Tim Brayton was there in silver underwear. He's co-ghosting the show today. And I'm Brennan Klein, I'm your ghost all the time, a Bride of Alternate Ending. It's our horror sideshow, once a month as you know. And this is the part where I say, it's science fiction. Tim, go.
Ooh. Sorry, you didn't tell me I was going to be called upon.
No, I didn't.
I'm going to give you 9.2. If only it would have been higher. You didn't just go for the throat lacerating screech at the caught in a celluloid jam.
I intend to record a full podcast after singing this song, so I was marking legitimate. A little bit.
We could have done that and then come back the following day.
You're right.
Or 2 days later, potentially. But thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Yes, I am Brennan. This is Tim, who's also talking. The song made that very clear, I think. But we're doing.
I mean, and I mean, I think you gave me credit. I'm in fact wearing no underwear right now, as I usually do not on our podcasts. But
this is a lot of information to process. This is the first time I'm hearing of this. But yes, so we are breaking into the schedule with another special episode of Bride of Alternate Ending. We will be returning with a quarterly theme next month, but August 2025 marks the 50th anniversary of the premiere of the Rocky Horror Picture Show in the UK, and we couldn't let that slip past us unacknowledged.
Yeah, because Rocky Horror was how we started this whole shebang.
It is.
Was it not? Yeah.
It was, yeah. It was our first episode. It is, I believe, a fundamental film in both of our kind of film-going DNA. I think that's relatively safe to say.
I think so.
And so I floated this idea by Tim. I was like, what if we discuss one of the movies covered in the opening song, Science Fiction Double Feature, that kind of lays out a bunch of film references and kind of tells you what the movie's going to do. And we ended up deciding on Day of the Triffids. I had not seen it, and also it felt a little more horror-y than, say, Flash Gordon.
Right, which Flash Gordon, the serial, that would have obviously been impossible because neither one of us wants to sink 6 hours into watching very low-grade sci-fi. Flash Gordon is actually the only thing in the song I had not seen. So
yeah, you were powerful. I've still got a couple to catch up on. I'm like more than 50%. I do not have the math in front of me, but let me see. I have seen The Day the Earth Stood Still, Tarantula, Curse of the Night of the Deep, whatever. It has a million titles. Night of the
Something
Demon.
of the Demon, yes.
What am I missing? Oh, Dr. X. I've not seen.
Dr. X, which Dr. X, the motion picture of that title, has nothing to do with a creature, so I think they might be using a more generic Dr. X than the specific 1932 film.
Okay,
titled Dr. X.
I'll allow it. I'll
forgive
myself.
Still, you need to see Dr. X.
I will work on that. And also, one of my biggest shames as a horror viewer is that I've still not seen the Invisible Man, the Universal one. But I'm working on it.
All right.
Anyway, so we decided to do Day of the Triffids. It's a 1963 production. It's based on the John Wyndham novel of the same name. You may know him as the author of The Midwich Cuckoos, which got made into Village of the Damned.
I will be perfectly honest, I did not put one and one together to get two until you just said that, but obviously this has very strong Village of the Damned vibes. So
maybe let's start. Should we put a pin in that, or should we start there? Because I'm very curious what you mean. I think
let's put a pin in that. I think there's obviously lots of preamble we should get through before we start actually talking about the movie. Because all we know right now is that there's Triffids, and the movie takes place over the course of a single day.
One of those things is correct. Anyway, okay, so let's get into it. So in brief, I mean it's gotta be one of the earliest post-apocalyptic movies to exist, right?
I mean, I don't know that, which I feel like I should, but it's actually one of the things I mentioned in my Letterboxd post. I feel like you have to give this movie credit for being way out in front of a lot of curves. Got to be one of the first post-apocalyptic. It precedes the kind of genre of under siege by monsters that I think will become much more prominent later in the 60s. Mm-hmm. So definitely the first of stuff, but I think post-apocalyptic is on the list of stuff it's the first of.
Yeah. I meant, was The Last Man on Earth before this? Like, it was certainly, this was going on in fiction on the page, but I don't know about movies.
Yeah, Last Man on Earth I think was tricky because Last Man on Earth I think came out in 61, and as I'm sure we'll get into, Day of the Triffids had a bizarre, broken production history, and it was probably still being shot at the point in time that The Last Man on Earth came out. No, Last Man on Earth was 64. Ooh. Wow, so this definitely completely precedes it.
Okay, very interesting. But yeah, so obviously we are getting kind of post-apocalyptic stuff in on the page way before this. Anyway, but yeah, no, it's definitely a very early example of what you were saying there. And if this had come out 7 years later, they would have made it a zombie movie.
100%. There's clearly, this is a movie anticipating Night of the Living Dead without realizing that it's doing so.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. But yes, anyway, so it is much more... I mean, actually, Night of the Living Dead is pretty sci-fi flavored in terms of the origin of the ghouls. But we open on a very sci-fi premise. There is a meteor shower that is going across the globe, and it's one of those movies where it seems to be nighttime and in every place across the globe, which is always fun. That Danny Boyle movie Yesterday, where the Beatles stop existing, that's another one where it's the same time everywhere.
For sure, the Danny Boyle film that Day of the Triffids makes me think of.
For sure. There's a lot of Danny Boyle DNA in here in general. But yes, there's a big meteor shower. Everyone who either looks at or is indirectly exposed to the flashes from the meteor shower wakes up, or at some point overnight they become blind.
Yes.
Also, I guess they arrived during the meteor shower, but they've also kind of been around before a little bit.
It feels to me like a previous round of meteors brought them to the planet, but then this round of meteors brings more of them, or perhaps activates the ones that were already there.
Yes, something to that end. But there are these carnivorous plants that are described like Venus flytraps, called Triffids, that grow at a rapid rate. They, in case you haven't heard science fiction double feature, they do spit poison
and kill.
They also kind of can emerge from the ground and walk on their roots and chase after people while making a sound that kind of sounds like one of those kids' plastic lawnmowers with like the popping plastic balls.
That is exactly what it sounds like, yes. And it's worth pointing out, they are described as Venus flytraps, but they are designed to look like ambulatory bromeliads.
Ooh, okay. That is much deeper than I could have gotten into describing it. I think... Since we're here, I think the design of the Triffids is one of the weaker points of the movie. I feel like they're very vague. They don't really look like something to me. They're just kind of like...
They look like walking alien space plants that kill you.
Yeah. But,
what are they to look like?
Well, they just kind of have like 5 kind of green stalks and then roots. And it just... I am
torn on the design of the Triffids because on the one hand, it is bad. Like, if I'm wearing my objective hat, yes, they're cheap, badly done. They're imaginative in unproductive ways, I guess might be the way I would frame it.
Yeah.
If I'm wearing my cozy British horror curled up with a mug of tea under the Afghan on the couch hat, I think they are perfectly wonderful, cheesy monsters. The part of me that, like, just vibes so hard with It Conquered the World or the Horror Party Beach is, like, 100% on board with the Triffids.
Yeah, Doctor Who, the Doctor could fight the Triffids like that.
Right, and that's another one of the things, honestly, that when I was talking about, you have to kind of remember this precedes so many things. It precedes Doctor Who, and wow. I feel like there is so much Doctor Who in this movie's lineage, but it can't be because Doctor Who post-dates it, but yeah, very, very strong Doctor Who vibes, both in terms of the monster design and really in terms of the plot.
Yeah, and in general, I mean, I think what we're getting at is that this feels like in a very British sci-fi horror
It does
story.
feel very British. Not least because one of the primary narrative arcs is, shall we make it to the continent? Mm-hmm. So, yes.
But yes, so, obviously if the majority of the population is blind and there are human-eating plants running around, this is a bad combination. Fortunately, for Bill Mason, who is an American navalman who was getting eye surgery at the time, his bandages were due to come off the morning after the meteor shower, so his sight is preserved. He and a few other sighted people, most notably a young schoolgirl named Susan, played by Janina Fey, kind of eventually band together. And guess what? He kind of forms a nuclear family with a pretty young woman who shows up and this little girl, and they try to survive and kind of explore Europe and figure out where is safe, etc. Post-apocalyptic things.
Yeah, I was gonna say, which again could be one of the first times that happens, although that hardly seems possible.
Yeah, that's the thing. And like I said, this is a tradition that existed on the page for a long time. This is based on a book that came out more than 10 years before. But the Day of the Triffids book, if I recall correctly, I read it a couple of years ago, is not as sprawling as this is, and it has a much narrower focus.
It is different.
Yes,
I would say both in the details and in sort of the ideas it wants to chase. It is not globe-trotting.
No,
the way that the movie is, for sure.
And it's much more about rebuilding society at home and basically like using women as birthing cows. And they say, that's a great idea. Let's do that.
Yeah, it very much is. So I made the joke about Danny Boyle before. 28 Days Later explicitly, avowedly draws from Day of the Triffids, but I think it actually draws from the book and not from the movie, because the book also involves like the establishment of a military dictatorship and the chaotic wake of collapse of society, and how are we going to escape this military dictatorship, which is something the book does not even, or the movie does not even hint at as a possibility. So it's more, the book I'd say is, I don't want to say a book of ideas because it's probably overselling it. It has more complicated thoughts than just, oh no, the big scary plants are going to eat us if we don't run.
Yeah.
Like one of the big changes in kind of the backstory, it's not really activated in the novel that I recall. It's been a couple years since I've read it as well. The Triffids are not extraterrestrial. In fact, the arrival of the meteor shower and the activation of the Triffids are just sort of happens, which I think is point for the movie because that's messy. But the Triffids are implied to be a Soviet research project gone amok, if I remember.
Oh, I did not recall that. Oh my goodness. But yeah, well, see, I think that is a thing with John Wyndham, is that, well, he's a very heady sci-fi author. Not very, but like that's what he's trying to do. Like I've read that and Midwich Cuckoos and Chalky, which is about a kid's imaginary friend that's like an alien thought being beamed into his head or something.
Okay.
So there's a lot
That's
of
a good concept.
Yeah, it's a good concept. But yeah, he's very much interested in ideas, and I think at the Day of the Triffids, this adaptation makes it more of a genre film to its benefit as a movie. But he likes to be working with multiple ideas at the same time. Like, does Village of the Damned need to have the weird kind of like force field around the village that makes everybody fall asleep before they all get pregnant at the same time? No. So this is just kind of one of those things where he just likes to slop more ideas than strictly needs to be in the same story, like all onto the same page.
When we agreed to pin talking about Village of the Damned / Midwich Cuckoos, which in that case I have not read the book. Actually, the only one of his books I've read is Day of the Triffids. But I think part of what I was responding to was in his Letterboxd review, Andrew Milne refers to the Day of the Triffids as being sort of a hat on a hat in its plotting. And I feel like that's what I was sort of noticing here and in Village of the Damned. Things require a lot of moving parts to get us to the fact that it's basically just running away from monsters in a way that feels, for reasons that probably make me a raging racist, extremely British to me. Like there just needs to be, like, you can't just have crazy shit happen the way you can just have crazy shit happen if it's an Italian or even an American movie. It has to be like, we have to see the prim little village. We have to see the tidy little hospital before everything goes nuts. And I feel like that's kind of the over-plotted nature feels very much of a piece to me.
Yes. Oh, I completely agree. And I will say, again, I read the 3 John Wyndham novels that I read all in the same month a couple of years ago. So it's equally fuzzy. But I believe The Village of the Damned is a more faithful adaptation than Day of the Triffids is. So I think the basic structure you're getting in the movie you can pull from as like Wyndham is providing that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so yeah, Day of the Triffids kind of takes that core concept and runs in another direction with it. And so that's what it is. We have this kind of sprawling post-apocalyptic thing. We get to see, I believe, Piccadilly Circus, but also you get to see the Arc de Triomphe. You get to see, I believe, that same street even that Cillian Murphy is on in 28 Days Later, but they don't show you Big Ben. But I do think they show you, what's next to Big Ben? The Houses of Parliament? Is that what it is?
I don't know. It's over there in London.
Yeah, but I believe they're on that same bridge, but they didn't show Big Ben, and I was like, I can't be certain. Then again, we're also going to Spain, or at least fake Spain, and it's all very exciting. Yes. Tipping my hand, I really liked this movie.
Yeah, no, I saw your star rating on Letterboxd sort of indicated a substantially higher level of enthusiasm than I feel that I have for it. I certainly admire that ambition. I admire that it's trying to sprawl and slop all over the place. And I do try to remind myself this does predate Doctor Who. This does predate Night of the Living Dead. This does predate the genre, really, of post-apocalyptic cinema. Because they're kind of working without a net a little bit, and that plus the just remarkably broken production that got us to the final film. We'll probably have to talk about that sooner rather than later. So a lot of headwinds against this movie, including the fact that it's sort of inventing a new genre. And I think that needs to be taken into account because I otherwise do find it a little stodgy. Okay. I have to be honest.
Well, the thing is, the book is so much stodgier that I felt like, wow, this is a bastion of liberal ideals, of licentiousness. But yeah, no. So for me, I mean, I had that kind of comp in my head, so it felt much freer to me. But yes, it's a bit stodgy. Like I said, they do kind of. It's one of those movies where apocalyptic survivors just automatically form a nuclear family because that's what's supposed to happen. And spoiler alert, it literally ends with when they are starting to put society back together, everyone going to church. Like it is very conservative. Like the way things are right now is good, and it would be perfect if we could get back to that when a wrench is thrown into the works.
Very, very true. Although I don't even just mean stodgy in terms of it feels conservative. I mean it feels stodgy in that it's kind of just like it doesn't want to be too exciting.
Well, see, that
would not be very British. Okay.
But I think there are places where the Britishness, that kind of set jaw, we're making the best of things vibe really, really works. I would specifically point to this small vignette of a scene where a plane is about to crash and all the pilots are blind and are trying desperately to land and know that they're running out of fuel. And they're basically telling the flight attendant, like, hey, just tell everyone we're going to make a landing. And, just like, let's be calm and face our death. That is such a grim British scene.
That is a tremendously good scene. That's one of the best scenes in this movie. So I don't want to say the Britishness is a problem. It's more that the overall momentum of the plot feels a little unwilling to go too fast or to be too exciting.
Yeah, and it is vignette driven. It's like, and now is the chapter where we're at this French boarding house or whatever.
Right down to having copious fades to black to interrupt anytime that the film substantially changes location.
Yeah. I mean, it honestly, this was not the case. This movie had a troubled production, but it never started as a television production. But I would believe that this was episodes of a television show strung
They
together.
feel like commercial breaks.
Yeah.
Also, just the overall structure does feel like episodes of television for sure. And I will say before we drift too far away from stodginess, this is a me problem. This is not a movie problem, but it's baggage I bring into the film. I can't remember if you mentioned the actor who plays Bill.
Oh, I meant to. I don't think I did, actually.
So he is Howard Keel, he's an MGM contract player from the 50s. He was in a bunch of their big A-list musicals at that point. I don't like him. I have never positively responded to Howard Keel like in anything, basically. And he's not nearly as off-putting in this for a lot of reasons. One is because he kind of slots into the overall vibe of the film. Two is that he's not singing, so I don't have to cope with his singing voice, or at least I should say his singing style. So I don't dislike him aggressively more in this movie than I typically do, but I don't vibe with his energy like at all. And I don't know if I'm bringing that into Day of the Triffids or if he's just that much someone that I don't like watching.
No, I think that's fair. I think I kind of expect not to enjoy the bland male lead of a 50s and early 60s sci-fi movie in general. So that kind of washed over me, but I will not say that he was a particular selling point of the movie at any point for me.
Okay, because I feel like, to me, there's a difference between this bland male lead, just feels kind of like a tattered old coat that's not really keeping me warm, but it's familiar and nice, and I like wrapping it around me, versus this male lead is a hair shirt, and Howard Keel is a hair shirt.
Okay, very fair. I think this is the first thing I've seen him in, so I don't come with that baggage. Although none of the acting I was particularly
acting,
against. It's just
the
there.
acting to me is maybe you are more positive than, because I would say the acting feels to me overall like a general net negative to the film. I think the movie it's not a character piece. Like, these are just people who are reacting to the events in the story, so bad acting doesn't really cause a problem for it. But I do think that in general I am not engaged with the performances.
Yeah.
At all.
I think that's fair. For me, I was just engaged with, again, there is a sense of scope. There is, like, I think there is effective material going on in terms of both watching them try to survive the onslaught of the Triffids and in watching the quick dissolution of polite British society.
Yes.
There's there's scenes of, like, people, a train arrives and it kind of is, herky-jerky and crashing a little bit, and people come spilling out of it. And to that, I mean, that I think is the quintessential moment in the movie, because this shows how society would fall into chaos if Britons are unable to mind the gap. It's just like, I thought that, I think it's really interesting going to empty places. That's something that's always held a fascination to me.
Sure.
But then also, I think even if it's episodic, even if it's stodgy, I kind of feel like there's not a lot of fat on this movie. It is all go, even though it's not going much of anywhere.
It absolutely, that is the case. It does not dawdle, even potentially in ways that it would benefit from. I mean, we've compared it to Night of the Living Dead, but I think the other thing I would compare it to might be Dawn of the Dead, not because of any reason other than I've got Night of the Living Dead on my head. But that movie in particular, I think, benefits from getting a situation set up, going as fast as it can to set up the situation, but then kind of just like stopping and being like, wait, the world ended. Let's look at it for a few minutes. Let's just kind of soak in this empty apocalyptic space. And I think this movie might potentially benefit from doing a little bit more of that. But, and I will say, we're finally going to talk about that production. I'm going to make it happen. Because it did, in fact, go so hard, and it gave itself so little room to dawdle that the assembly cut of this motion picture was 60 minutes long.
I say put it out. Leave it at that.
I would too. And I think in 1962, when this was like it was in the can in 1961. I think that's a viable length. I think you can still get a B picture out for about an hour. At that point in the early 60s, maybe not. Maybe that's really over by the late 50s.
Yeah,
but the producers... Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is kind of a B picture putting on airs of an A picture.
Oh, it absolutely is. Again, my first point of comparison for the Triffids was Corman. Like, we're not... This is not a prestige picture. I think it has designs on being a prestige picture. It cast Howard Keel, not that far past when Howard Keel was an A-list actor. But the producer, a gentleman who seems like a real piece of work, just based on the subsequent life of this project, named Philip Jordan, felt that 60 minutes was too short, so we had better get in there and add to that running time, which they did by just coming up with a whole new subplot and just cross-cutting to that subplot as needed until this thing finally limps its way to 93 minutes.
Yeah, it is these two completely non-touching parallel storylines. I mean, the one way that they touch really is that they kind of discover how to defeat the Triffids and eventually are able to pass that information.
There's exposition in the new subplot that they didn't have time or money to shoot or whatever in the old subplot. So for the audience, we're learning information about the Triffids that is useful to us as we see it play out in the A plot. But no, there are 0 points of contact between the two plots, and that plot involves a married couple, the Goodwins, played by Jeanette Scott and Kieran Moore, sciencing in a lighthouse. Mm-hmm. The end. Yeah,
they're studying how to fight the Triffids, mainly because he's drunk and got bored of marine biology.
Pretty much.
And yeah, they kind of snipe at each other, but then they work together and they solve some problems. And, you know, Jeanette Scott gets the name drop in science fiction double feature. So good for her.
Did you really get hot when you saw her?
No, I wouldn't say so. But I don't think I was going to. I wasn't expecting to.
No, I feel they were going for the rhyme because she is fine.
Yeah. And maybe she's someone who means more to British people, but I'm not really familiar with her. But she and her co-star in those scenes are credited something very strange, like by special arrangement in the opening credits. It has their credit.
I assume that has to be in some capacity because of the weird production history. They hired those two. They wrote those scenes in part because they were no longer able to get the first round cast back, whether that was for financial reasons or not. I'm not sure.
Probably. Like, what were they doing?
I don't love Howard Keel, but Howard Keel's not like free, so I'm sure that's part of it. I assume that there was some way the contract was written for this, like, come in and be in our emergency backup cast. I assume led to that framing of the credits.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely a lot of this reeks of like contract negotiations and reshoots and all of that stuff, and that is probably the worst element of the movie by far. It's makes it more clunky.
And that's the thing, like, you know, we're talking about it as just fun production trivia, but I think it manifests in terms of those cutaways, which represent around a third of the running time, just are very bad for the film's sense of flow. They're not supposed to be there. They weren't really written to be that way. That's where a lot of those fades to black happen, is getting us in and out of the lighthouse scenes. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you're not wrong that it's moving pretty well. It's a pretty tight movie when it's focused on Bill and Susan just kind of terrassing their way across England and into France and into Spain. But then we keep having these cutaways to what was very obviously shot on the cheap. It's like one set, right?
Yeah.
So literally even a second set we see those characters in.
I think we see them in their bedroom upstairs, but not that could be any set, you know. It's not.
Yeah. So like every time the movie starts to get this head of steam and we start like plunging faster and faster into this post-apocalyptic wasteland, we go back to the lighthouse and it just beats the film with a baseball bat, I think.
I do agree, pacing wise. I I didn't hate those sequences, but it is frustrating at the point when you realize, oh, these are not going to ever intersect. Because coming into this movie, I did not know about its production woes. Coming out of it, I was like, I need to read up on these production woes. Something happened.
Something happened. You can feel it. It's not one of those, like, what a strange series of choices. It was clearly like this movie got compromised.
Yeah.
No one would make it that way.
Yeah, and that's disappointing. Although I think the 30 minutes that they scrambled together are totally fine. Like, they're adequate. It's not like it's significantly worse than the other movie. It's a little worse. And the Triffids look worse.
It's less interesting. The Triffids definitely, they were put in a closet in the humidity or something.
Yeah.
They look a lot worse.
And when they're moving in the lighthouse, you're definitely like, okay, that thing's on wheels. In times where you're not feeling that in the other bits.
No, for sure. So maybe that's even the biggest difference between your response to the movie and mine, is that I bounce really hard off those lighthouse scenes. And it's not even the scenes themselves. They're fine. The actors are doing what they can with a pretty hastily written functional script. But I find it throws off the momentum so hard.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I really vibed with this movie. I do like a post-apocalyptic movie. I do like a world falling apart movie. I had the same kind of more than you reaction to something like Rambach Berlin Undead, which I think is kind of across the board a better put together movie than this one.
Oh, I think I would agree.
But I'm kind of an easy sell on. I will get it. You will get me in the door on a premise like this.
Sure.
And I'm ready to be entertained. And I felt like the good generally outweighed the bad. I felt like it had a pretty decent sense of atmosphere. Sorry, we're gonna say something.
Oh no, I was going to agree with you. I would even say it has I think an actively good sense of atmosphere. But I don't want to interrupt your thoughts, so go ahead and finish, and then I'll circle back.
Yeah, no worries. I'll kind of circle back to atmosphere naturally anyway. But there was a part, literally, there was a part that made me gasp out loud. Like, I didn't scream or jump, but I was like, there's a part where they're in this Spanish mansion with a couple that's about to birth a child, and they've put together an electric fence. And you turn to look at the fence a couple hours later, and suddenly there's just hundreds of Triffids behind the fence waiting to eat them. And that cut made me go, oh! Which very infrequently happens for a movie of this budget, of this vintage.
Sure.
But yeah, speaking about atmosphere in general, yeah, there's some good cross-cutting and tension sequences. There is a great sequence set in this kind of choking fog where they are trying to get their car out of a rut in the mud. Yeah, just atmospherically, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the choking fog sequence was definitely one of the things I was thinking of when I ever so gently pushed back on the qualification of how good the atmosphere is. I think that's a really terrific scene. I think it's shot well, staged well. I really love the moment you're touching on with the Triffids lined up. I think the Triffids in Spain is a good thing. I think the movie ends on a strong point in that respect. I mean, obviously the last few minutes of the movie are a catastrophe, but I mean, we'll get there or not. But that image of the Triffids lined up like a cactus forest outside that fence, and we see it several times, it never stops working for me. And then at a certain point, spoilery, they burn the Triffids, and it feels like it's maybe we've had success, and we get lots of shots of the Triffids on fire leaning against this fence. But then post the burning, we see them kind of rattling themselves back to life. Really, really potent stuff, I think. I really like that sequence in terms of just the strangeness of the Triffid props in that context. But the way I was going to get us to that point, by latching on to atmosphere, because I think that is great atmosphere. But I feel like I agree with you to an extent. I am a pretty easy sell for post-apocalyptic settings. I think empty spaces that shouldn't be empty are just good cinema.
Yeah.
But I'd also say one of the things I am very much an easy touch for, and maybe I'm approaching the movie from a different direction you are, I love a good cheesy monster, especially one that's like not afraid of itself. Like, you know, there's the movies where they're like, oh no, we made a cheesy monster, let's hide it. And then there's movies like, we made a cheesy monster, but if we just shoot it like it's not cheesy, you might convince yourself that it's good. And Corman does this a lot. Again, It Conquered the World has just the most god-awful traffic cones with teeth. but they're presented like they're scary, and so they become scary to me. And I feel the Triffids fall in that category. So for me, this is like a great cheesy monster film. And then by the end, it gets that Spain sequence, and the cheesy monsters suddenly start becoming actually kind of uncomfortable to look at because something's just not right there. And I think this is one of the strengths of the film. The Triffids feel alien. Like at a certain point, I stop reading them as this is a cheap plant prop, or even just plants that are being like shaken by a grip. I don't know. And they start to feel like this is not of this earth. The textures are wrong. The way it moves are wrong. So even though what I'm seeing is a kind of ineptly made plant monster, the way it's filmed, especially again in the Spain sequence, really starts to override my knowledge of that and turn it into, no, this feels like an intrusion from space.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I don't know. I think the Triffids are effective as part of the overall post-apocalyptic atmosphere.
Sure.
Like, I think that they work as a credible threat. I just feel like I can't visually click onto them. Like, I just feel like they're lacking something that makes me scared of them, or that makes me even recognize them as a presence or a consciousness. Or
well, they look like garbage.
Yeah,
they're awful. Objectively, that's probably why you're not clicking with them.
Yeah,
I think I just at a certain point I made the decision I will meet movies with horrible monsters 3/4 of the way.
Yeah,
5/10 or 9/10 of the way. But no, they're bad. They're bad props.
No, I think
let's be clear.
I think for me it's an issue that is endemic to like headier sci-fi, and I'm not saying the movie Day of the Triffids is, but when you're trying to create a sci-fi monster that feels truly alien, but if you go too far from the things that we humans are in our lizard brains recognize as a credible threat, it can make it difficult to wrap your head around it. Like, the xenomorph looks alien in such a good way in Alien, but it has a mouth, and that mouth has another mouth, and both of them are scary, and they can bite you and eat you, and that is something that is kind of primordial.
Sure.
And I don't know, I really like the Blob, and I think that's effective, so that's kind of a puncture in my argument a little bit. But
although I will say what you just said kind of gives me a new insight maybe into why the Spain sequence feels so much better than the rest of the movie. The Triffids go from being individual props being rolled around on casters and kind of shaking as they do so, to they've basically become a jungle that is rattling and shaking, and it's not clear why it's rattling and shaking, but jungles that are shaking do trigger a response in apes like ourselves, and I think maybe that's why that sequence works. It goes from being one-off plant monsters to the dark primordial forest of plant monsters.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's partially why I was like actively scared in those sequences. Just in addition to them being pretty solid in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was just kind of on and off with the Triffids as a specific menace. But I liked what we're doing in this movie. I don't know. I just had a nice time. In kind of a dumbass eat your popcorn kind of way.
No, and I think that it works on that level. I do think it's interesting that we seem to have taken different paths, because I feel for me it's good cheesy monsters with a post-apocalyptic movie that sometimes work. For you, it's a good post-apocalyptic movie with cheesy monsters that sometimes work. But I think we're landing at the same place. Like, well, the movie, it's solid. It's giving me the things it promised, which are not terribly ambitious. Mm-hmm. But, it's a good romp. And again, it's doing something that just was not commonplace in 1963. It's more commonplace now. I think this movie becomes a ton less effective if Night of the Living Dead is out, and then we read it as a Night of the Living Dead ripoff.
Oh my god, yeah.
It's clearly not as good as that. But it's not. It's kind of out there. It's doing new stuff. It's made in a country that I think has always been a little skittish about making good horror. Mm-hmm. Not to, again, just unload with all my racism on the English, but I think it's a very credible effort at doing that kind of bleakness in the context of a specific national film industry that's not equipped to do bleakness in that way.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is the fact of the horror comes from the system in chaos, more than blood and guts and like really sensational. I mean, Hammer horror type stuff of what they were going for. And so they are allowed to have all of the morals and all of the like upright citizenship, like believe in the system vibes that they want, and have the driving force of the conflict be how do they maintain this in the face of what's going on. Right.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I don't really have that much more I really am itching to say about it. How about you? Is there something that we haven't touched on that you feel like we should?
Not really. I mean, I think we've kind of unpacked what's good about the film. It's not it's not a complicated film. It doesn't have as many moving parts as like a 28 Days Later, which is, I think, very easy to describe as the better version of Day of the Triffids, honestly.
Absolutely. And even Night of the Comet is the better version of Day of the Triffids.
That's honestly probably fair. But no, I think it works. I think it's a good time. I think it's been superseded. And that's true of a lot of older movies that do a thing early and not overly well. The next movie comes along and does it better, and that's okay. I will say we didn't talk about the ending. Because to circle back around to the reasons I'm a little chilly on this film. So it has two endings that are both sort of flat-footed and pat because it has two unrelated plot lines and they both need to resolve. So in one, great beat where Bill distracts the Triffids to let the other people escape by turning on an ice cream truck chime.
Yes.
I love that sequence. I love the scene of all the Triffids kind of reorienting themselves to quote-unquote look at what he's doing. That's great. And then they leave this like fortified place in Spain they're at. And then a little while later, he just kind of waddles out to a cliff and sees a rubber boat. And he's like, yay, it's the Navy's come to save me. And he dives and gets picked up by the boat. And it just feels kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah.
But then there's the final scene of the movie, which goes back to the lighthouse and the Goodwins. And it initially becomes a kind of pretty okay Night of the Living Dead-esque under siege sequence where the Triffids are finally trying to break down the doors to the lighthouse. And it's, again, the Triffid props are the worst for the wear by that point in the shoot. But it works well enough. I think the actors sell it. But then they just kind of like find out that saltwater kills the Triffids, and they're like, hooray, saltwater kills the Triffids, the end of the movie. And it's such a lame, stupid ending, and it just completely... I think my dislike for the lighthouse plot really is because it ends on such a fart.
Yeah.
Rather than because it is bad in and of itself.
And also it's telegraphed like miles ahead because there's a big sign on the hose in the lighthouse that's like, seawater, not for drinking, highly corrosive. And it's like, gee, I wonder if that... And it keeps panning past that sign. And like, what's going to happen?
Right.
Like, you're too far ahead of the characters. You're like, try the hose. Come on.
Yeah. So yeah, I find that it does suffer... One of the worst things I think a movie can suffer from, which is having one of the worst things that ever happens in the entire film be the last minute.
Yeah.
Maybe literally the worst minute of this film is its last minute. I might be willing to actually sign off on that specific formulation.
Well, so there's also, I think we're kind of forgetting that last bit because they discover the salt water and then there's like those 30 seconds of narration. They're like, we did it and we're all going to church. Which is also
I mean,
bad.
I'm not discounting the church sequence as being part of the very bad last minute.
Okay, good.
The church sequence is really stupid.
It's idiotic.
Especially because the church sequence is just like, I think it's in Spain again, but it's like, didn't we kind of escape Spain? So why are we back in Spain? None of our characters are here. It's just random Spaniards. And maybe it's the last 90 seconds. Maybe it's, I did time it. The last time we see the Bill Mason subplot is about 5 minutes and 40 seconds before the end of the movie.
Woof.
So maybe I'm really saying it is literally the last 5.5 minutes of the movie. But I think even that last sequence gets worse as it goes along.
Yeah, no, that is troubling. But it's at least still, even though they, padded it out, it's still a 93-minute movie. And so
It's still a 93-minute movie.
the hell out of there by the time it really gets to you.
And I may be just being overly responsive because I do tend to get really bummed out when movies have a bad ending compared to when any other part of them is bad. And that's also a me problem.
Yeah, well, it's tough. I mean, that's only natural. If you end on a high, that leaves you on a high, and then you're out of the movie and you're thinking about good things. And that's just, you got to have a good ending because otherwise it dictates that your feelings the first time you start thinking about the movie as a whole. Like, that's just natural.
No, for sure.
But yeah. Oh, also, so before we totally get off the subject of this movie in general, I was talking about apocalypse in fiction before movies were really picking him up. And obviously we've talked about Last Man on Earth, which is loosely based on I Am Legend, which is probably my favorite post-apocalyptic story from this era.
That's really great. Yeah,
it's so fucking good. But I do want to point to, there is a novella by Jack London called The Scarlet Plague that I think is very similar to Day of the Triffids in the sense of it has a lot of outdated ideas of what societal hierarchies can and should be, and a lot of outdated language. But it's about a flu pandemic wiping out most of the world, and it's really chilling, and it's really kind of bracing and terrifying in a way that I wasn't expecting from a Jack London.
When did he write it?
It was published in 1912.
Ooh, just a couple years before.
Yeah. So
good for him.
Yeah. I do highly recommend checking that out if you can stomach some incredibly old-fashioned ideas at the center of it. But yeah, that's something that I was trying to think of it off the top of my head, but I couldn't, so I had to look it up, and I wanted to just bring it up at the end just to put a button on that.
And, I'd say the idea of, the haunted quality of ruined spaces is clearly older than 60s cinema.
Absolutely.
It's a genre of 19th century painting. Let's find old ruined abbeys and paint them and make them look lonely and forlorn, and how troubling it is that this human space is no longer containing humans. And in some cases beautiful, but I think a lot of those are kind of very ghostly and unsettling paintings. It's a long-standing interest that I think certainly does not get invented literally in 1963 or even in 1954 when the novel comes out. But it works. It's good, and I think works really well in cinema because cinema is the art form of pictures that move. And when you have that combination of a picture that moves and a space that doesn't, it does become, I think, a little more kind of sad and creepy. And to just kind of tie things back off with I Am Legend, the second film adaptation of I Am Legend, which is The Omega Man, which is not a very good movie. But the scenes of Los Angeles without people in it at the start of The Omega Man are maybe my all-time favorite places that should have people but don't cinema.
Oh, I have not seen The Omega Man. I need to check that one out.
You should. I don't think you'll love it. It's got some pretty substantial problems, and the Charlton Heston of it is a lot to take. But if you are even a little bit on board with post-apocalypse, and you are more than a little bit on board with them, you absolutely have to see it.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds really interesting, because when I think of those shots, first I think of Cillian Murphy wandering around London in his hospital gown.
Absolutely.
And then I think of empty LA in Night of the Comet. That might be specifically, partially because it has that eerie burnt orange sky in that movie. But there's also the specific places that they show in LA I've been and know very well. So I'd be curious if Omega Man has the same potency for me. So I definitely want to check it out now.
No, I think you should for sure make that a priority. Again, it's got a lot of problems, but I think the post-apocalyptics is not the problem.
Yeah, any adaptation of I Am Legend, I will assume, has extreme problems.
This is very fair.
Based on the evidence. Did you know that this is not the time to be talking about that they're trying to make this sequel to the Will Smith movie, but they are. Anyway.
Well, that's the problem with making an adaptation of I Am Legend that left itself room for a sequel.
Woof. But yes, so let's close up this conversation. So excited to talk about Day of the Triffids, but we are resuming a a quarterly theme next month. You can keep an eye out on the Patreon for we're going to put up a poll for the first movie we cover that quarter. Don't know what the topic is yet. I still need to talk to Tim about it. But next up on the podcast, I believe you'll be hearing me coming back for the September preview episode. And, we'll take a look ahead at what 2025 has for us after a summer season that I must say has been kind of like scratching my nails into my eyes a little bit in terms of what new movies are coming to theaters.
I typically don't see new movies because it is difficult to see new movies. For the last couple of months, I've not been seeing new movies because I would pay money not to have to see them.
Yeah. Oh, it has been brutal. I thought it's going to be tough. I'm going to wait till the end of the year, see what pops up out of the woodwork. But I thought 2023 was the worst year for cinema since I've been alive, and 2025 is edging closer to that than I thought was going to be possible coming into this year.
I mean, I haven't seen very much, but it feels awful to me that the only film I've seen that I am like excited about is Mission Impossible 8, which is also like at best the 5th best Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah, no, it is rough. I think my number one movie of the year, which thankfully is genuinely a good movie, is Final Destination Bloodlines. But it's like, come on.
Still need to see that. That's like the last movie that came out that I wanted to see, and I still haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, no worries. I hope that one will serve you well, but it's also like, it's not number one of the year material, but it might end up, that might be where we're at. Anyway, tune in next week for the September preview, and until then, bye!